Hello there, time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. Joining us are The Sun's chief football correspondent, Charlie Wyatt, and Sam Dean, football reporter for The Telegraph. Welcome to you both. Let's run through the back pages. We'll start with Charlie's paper, The Sun, which leads with Manchester City's triumph that sets up that Wembley final with Arsenal. And below the picture of City's celebrations, the headline, "You what, Slot?" as the Liverpool boss claims style of play ultimately means more than winning trophies. Can't wait to debate that one. The back page of the Mirror also splashes on Omar Mamouche as the focal point of City's comfortable win over Newcastle in that semi-final. And the same paper's front page pays tribute to the sad loss of legendary snooker player and commentator John Virgo, who has passed away at the age of 79. Sam, Charlie, great to have you with us. Now, let's get to Manchester City against Newcastle in that Carabao Cup semi-final second leg. Comfortable win for City, very comfortable. And it sets up a Wembley day with Arsenal in the final, Charlie, a repeat of the 2018 final. What's your reaction to this matchup?
Well, it's going to be a great final. That's for sure. I mean, that match 2018 was the last time Arsenal fans are able to go to Wembley for a cup final, because of course they won the cup final in 2020, but it was COVID. So that game in 2018 was their last time. Guardiola's first trophy. His assistant was a certain Mikel Arteta for that game. So yeah, it's going to be fascinating. But I think, in terms of today's game, it really disappointing for Newcastle. It was always going to be an uphill battle for them, wasn't it? But they were the holders. Last season, it was one of my favourite stories of the season. It was a great event, wasn't it? Newcastle finally winning a trophy. So for them to sort of go out so meekly, and for those 5,000-6,000 Newcastle fans to sort of go there and basically tie over after 10 minutes was really disappointing. But a good night for City and Pep Guardiola.
Why was it such a meek performance from Newcastle, Sam? Or was it the case that City were just that dominant this evening?
Well, it was interesting watching it, having also watched Arsenal v Chelsea last night, when Liam Rossini was criticised quite heavily for being too cautious and I think trying to stay in the game for the first 60, 65 minutes and then trying to add the attacking players and open up at that point. It looked to me tonight like Newcastle wanted to be more aggressive from the off. They were pressing very high, very aggressively, trying to push up, and that left space in behind. And I think when you roll the dice like that against a team like Manchester City, especially given the changes they made with Marmouche and Semenyo sort of playing as wide central, sort of wide forwards, wide strikers, it left them completely exposed. And I suppose we could say, Rossini was criticised last night for being too cagey. I suppose Howe has perhaps gone too far down the other end of the scale and perhaps been too open in pursuit of a result that overturns a first leg defeat.
Yeah, looking at the back page of the Star here, Omar, the Blue Moon, Pep's men tune up for final with thrashing. You look at Newcastle's season, Charlie, out the League Cup now, way off it in the Premier League. They got that tricky Champions League playoff couple of ties to contend with as well. Is it a case now of just trying to salvage this season?
It is, and this month looks stacked, doesn't it, in terms of games? And yeah, it's all about Carabao really now, and trying to stop the slide in the Premier League, and I really hope they can do it. Of course, I'd love to see them progress in the Champions League. It's been a tough spell for Eddie Howe, but I think the fans are all behind him, aren't they? And when you look at what a brilliant season it was, last year, but it has been tough. Tonight was disappointing, and Sam's made a really good point there, and I totally agree in terms of Liam Rossini was getting the stick last night. Well, that game was really nervy for Arsenal. Even in injury time, even though it was a terrible game, as we all know, even in the 96th minute, it was edgy, and Rossini's game plan was a deflection from working, whereas tonight, again, there was a point even after the couple of the goals from City, Eddie Howe went for it and it just didn't work, and it was never going to work. And a struggling Newcastle team going away to Manchester City, I guess we shouldn't really been surprised.
And another negative for Newcastle, Anthony Gordon going off injured, looked like a hamstring. Charlie makes the point there, Sam, that perhaps the Newcastle fans are still behind Eddie Howe. When do you have that conversation about whether he is the man to turn this form around for Newcastle? Because it's been quite a disappointing season so far.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would object to that a little bit. I think Newcastle still in the Champions League. They've reached semi-final of the League Cup. They're still very much in contention for the European places in the Premier League. I don't think this has been disastrous. And I think it's another sign, really, of how draining and demanding the calendar is for teams who get into Europe. And fundamentally, Newcastle have a very good team, but they haven't got a squad that can compete with the biggest sides in the league still. And you look at you mentioned the injury to Gordon, that's going to hurt them too. But we've seen in the last few weeks just how damaging it has been to lose Bruno Guimaraes, who they've still not won a game without in 4 years, which is a remarkable statistic. But they're missing Lewis Miley, Emil Krat, Tino Livramento, Fabian Schär as well. Like when a team like Newcastle misses a few key players like that, it can have a really damaging effect. Whereas compared to Man City and Arsenal and Chelsea, if those teams miss a few players, they've got the depth to cope with it. And I think that's probably the biggest issue for Newcastle personally, rather than Eddie Howe himself. But of course, questions will be asked for as long as they're not seen to be progressing. And if people think it's starting to go a bit stale, then inevitably minds and fingers will start pointing at Eddie Howe. But I still think they're a long way from that point myself.
Yeah, still positives to look for Newcastle's season, and of course mitigating circumstances as well. And Howe's stock is still clear very high, as Roy Keane wanted Eddie Howe, didn't he, to take over Manchester United when Ruben Amorim left. But it's all going pretty well for Manchester United and Michael Carrick, I might add. But let's go back to the back page of the Star now. Talk Arsenal, because that's who Manchester City will meet in the final. Nothing going to stop us. You can see that on the left-hand crossbar, written by a friend of the show, John Cross. For Arsenal, this is a chance, perhaps, Charlie, to rewrite the perception that people have of them, of being that so-called nearly team. Competing at the top of the Premier League, but not quite winning it, getting to semi-finals, not making it to finals. Is this a chance for them to turn perceptions around?
Oh, absolutely. It's a great chance. I mean, you know, the fact they've got past their first semi-final, after 4 defeats, they're in the final. Arsenal have to win the trophy this season, or Mikel Arteta has to win the trophy. And they'll probably, I think, expect more than the Carabao Cup, certainly where they are in the league. I mean, they're going to win the league, aren't they? There's every reason why they could, go deep again in the Champions League. But of course, that first trophy, is so important. And, as we mentioned earlier, in 2018, when City beat Arsenal, that was Guardiola's first trophy in Arsene Wenger's last season. So it would do a hell of a lot for confidence. To get that winning feeling, within the squad, and I'm sure Arsenal go on and over the next couple of years get a few more trophies. But that first one they really need to do, or rather the first one for 6 years under Arteta. But obviously there's a lot of new players there. They've signed a lot of players in the summer. Arteta has been backed. He spent over £1 billion, 250 million last summer. So the Carabao Cup can't be the only trophy. It has to be the first of many.
Martin Odegaard has been speaking, and some quotes here in this article from the Arsenal captain, as the team obviously chased down their first Premier League title for 22 years. He says, in terms of feeling the pressure, sometimes, he says, you can feel it, obviously. Of course, they're going to feel nervous at some point, so nerves are a part of football. This level, you just have to deal with it. And seemingly, so far, Sam, they are. But it's really only just going to ramp up, isn't it, as it gets closer and closer to the end of the Premier League season?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they know that. And I think that the challenge will be, a lot of the times will be the home games. I think that's been the case for a lot of the matches this season at home, when that desperation to win from the home crowd, which is totally understandable, but it kind of seeps onto the pitch and into the minds of the players, I think. And I think some of their more sort of clammy performances have come when the home crowd has become a bit nervous and a bit anxious. And sometimes I sit there and think, relax, this is a really good team. You've got a team in a great position in the Premier League in 4 competitions, an amazing squad, the best squad in Europe, I would say. And there's no need for all this stress. But because of the history, 3 consecutive second place finishes, that nervousness and that tension is always going to be there. And of course, Odegaard's going to mention that when asked about it today, and the nerves there, and the fact that the players can feel that, because the players are not immune to that. Of course they feel it. The atmosphere makes a huge difference to how they perform and the way they operate. And I think a big challenge for Arsenal, as much as holding off Man City or whoever might challenge them at the top of the Premier League in the next few months, the challenge for them will be keeping their emotional cool as a club and as a fan base, and sort of trusting in the process. I know that's a phrase that Arteta used to like and he's had some stick for, but I think in this case it really does apply, that Arsenal are an exceptionally good team and they need to trust in that, and their fans need to trust in that and let them go. And I think that's there was a good sign in that regard against Chelsea last night, when I thought the atmosphere was very positive and a lot more enthusiastic than I think in previous home games over the past month or so. So perhaps a shift of the mood there following Arteta's comments when he sort of asked the fans to jump on the boat and enjoy the ride more than they have been so far.
Yeah, there'll be sports psychologists listening to you, Sam, saying he's saying all the right things. Flip it, they might see it as pressure, but should it actually be a privilege? But Charlie, looking ahead to that final, 7 weeks between them getting to the final and actually playing the final. It's a long layoff between the two sides facing each other. I mean, how might that play into either side's hands? How will they handle that long wait to actually playing at Wembley?
Well, I mean, the interesting thing is that there's a chance that Manchester City could play Arsenal in the Champions League quarterfinals, and they've got to play each other April 18th. So in theory, they could be playing each other 4 times in a month, which would be remarkable, wouldn't it? And yes, we'll see how that one goes. But look, I think there's a lot of games to play before the cup final. It will be a brilliant day. I'm absolutely sure of that. But particularly for Arsenal fans who will be desperate to get a ticket for that game, and Arsenal will fancy their chances. Of course they will, and the reason why I still think they're going to win the league. 3 things. First of all, we mentioned about the nerves, but they have had the experience of finishing second the last 3 seasons, so that should benefit them now. B, they're better, and C, Manchester City are not better, and Liverpool obviously fallen away completely. So this is Arsenal's season. I cannot believe they're going to choke.
They really could be on the verge of doing something special, still going for 4 separate trophies in 4 competitions this season. OK, we'll leave it there for the moment. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be looking at more of the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. I mentioned it at the beginning of the show, and we'll dive into Arne Slot's comments about style being more important than trophies in the long run. Does he have a point? Maybe. We'll discuss it in a couple of minutes. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Back Pages tonight, and welcome back to The Sun's chief football correspondent, Charlie Wyatt, and Sam Dean, football reporter for The Telegraph. We've mentioned it a couple of times, but let's get straight to Arne Slot's comments, because there's been a lot of discussion about this. Back page of The Sun, Cop boss wild claim. You what, Slot, is the headline. And this becomes because Arne Slot has basically said in a roundtable discussion that playing style is worth more than lifting trophies. Charlie, what do you make of this? Because it seems to have got the fans a little bit riled up.
Well, he's gone all Arsene Wenger. Because I definitely went to press conferences at Arsenal, and Wenger used to say stuff like that and used to get all sorts of stick. But Wenger would always say that, I want pure football, and that's important to me rather than just winning the odd cup. And Slot's virtually said the same thing, isn't he? So I can understand why some fans, or a lot of fans, are a bit puzzled by it. It's obviously weird timing. This is a manager under pressure. But let's not forget, last season, I still feel he did, incredibly well to win the title. It was easy just to say, oh, it was with Klopp's team. But he won the title easily. And that's because he did make a bit of a tactical switch, and they weren't quite as entertaining as they were under Klopp. So, he actually was successful by being a bit more cautious. So I think it's strange comments, and there's middle ground. I mean, look, if you're manager of Liverpool, you want people to look back and think, he didn't just win titles; he played great football. So I do understand that, but the timing at the moment is basically, a coach who knows that. I think he knows that some of the fans are losing faith in him.
Yeah, Sam, what do you make of the timing of this, considering how poorly the defence of their title is going? And what was he trying to achieve by making these comments, do you think? Well,
I think he was just saying his opinion. And I think as journalists and media, we welcome that. We welcome a diversity of opinion. I think it's a very sort of historically kind of Dutch perspective, I would say. Obviously, the first thing I thought when I saw those comments was it sort of harks back to Johan Cruyff, who I think most famously spoke about the importance of style over results. And it feels a bit like Dutch football heritage to me that Slot's taken a similar line. And perhaps they'd be having this debate on the equivalent show in the Netherlands and saying how wonderful it is. And it's a different football culture here. And maybe that's the mistake, that he's not quite read that room. And that's perhaps why Liverpool fans might be reacting badly to it. But I think it's an interesting debate, though. I mean, because you can look through the history of football, and there are lots of teams that are remembered more that didn't win anything than the teams that beat them in that particular season. I think Cruyff's 74 World Cup team, probably the best example of that. But there are examples even in recent years. And I look at, for example, Spurs under Pochettino. I think for 2 or 3 years, their fans had probably the best time they've had in a generation. They won nothing, but they had a wonderful time, and they played great football, and they really enjoyed it. And think back to sort of Liverpool in that Suarez, Sturridge, Brendan Rodgers season, 2013-14. And again, they had a great time, watched it. The journey was brilliant. The roller coaster was there. And yes, they didn't win the trophy in the end, but I think a lot of fans thoroughly enjoyed that campaign and remember that really fondly, perhaps more than a campaign in which you win just the League Cup, for example. So it's an interesting debate and an interesting kind of talking point, I think. I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say trophies are overrated, but I do think for fans, it's often the journey is as fun as the destination, and perhaps that's what Slot's trying to get at with his quotes. But I do agree with your question, Jess, that the timing of it's not great when you're having a difficult season. Your star players thrown a strop, and everyone's a little bit concerned about the medium-term future. So perhaps not the best time, but I think an interesting point for him to make anyway.
Yeah, we've been watching Liverpool all this season, and we've been asking questions. I say we, fans, the media, pundits, have been asking questions about Liverpool's playing style, which Klopp is mentioning here. What is his playing style? Does he know? Because it doesn't seem to be clear, considering how different they're playing from last season.
Well, they made too many changes. That's the problem. That was the fundamental issue. And obviously, there were some, out of their control. But I think the interesting situation regarding what Slot said today is, in the last few days, in the last day, there's lots of people lining up to give Mikel Arteta a proper kicking, saying that Arsenal are boring. And they're definitely less entertaining than they have been. But look where they are in the league. And 2 or 3 years ago, Arteta's team were playing some fabulous football. They really were, and they didn't win anything. So that in itself is just the example of Arteta's decided to go the other way, and every Arsenal fan who are probably having their mates sort of sneer and saying your team's a bit dull, they don't care. Arsenal fans don't care. They want to win the title. So I think sometimes just winning is more important than style of play. There's obviously a balance.
There is a balance, Sam, and I wonder whether this is just another opportunity for the Liverpool fans who have lost faith in Arne Slot to just, get on his back again.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, I think Liverpool fans, and I think historically Liverpool fans haven't been quick to turn on managers, and I don't get the sense that they're all collectively ready for Slot to go. I don't get that feeling at all. I think in many cases, a lot of the anger from Liverpool fans is actually towards the people above Slot and the executives and the directors, and the questions being asked about the squad building and the signings that haven't been made, as well as the signings that have been made, of course. So I'm not sure Slot's under that kind of huge, intense fire right now, but that might be because it's Liverpool and a club that doesn't historically turn on managers this swiftly. But certainly he will know that he's under severe pressure from the sort of just the fact that his team isn't doing very well this season and playing very well. And also there's that now spectre looming above all top managers and top clubs of Xabi Alonso. And to a lesser extent, I think Enzo Maresca too, that you've got two very, very good coaches available on the market looking for jobs. And if you're a manager struggling a little bit, you must know that your fan base and perhaps even your executives are casting glances towards those out-of-work managers. And I think that shadow, I think, will loom over Slot for as long as Alonso is available. And it perhaps might be the sort of thing that, as time goes on, if Liverpool don't really kick on, that the sort of thing that could lend to Anfield and the Kop beginning to turn properly on him.
Yeah, and the next match doesn't come much bigger than hosting Manchester City, of course, this coming Sunday. OK, let's get to the back page of the Times now. Interesting story on ITV adverts in Six Nations scrum breaks. So ITV will show adverts during play in its Six Nations coverage in a landmark moment for television broadcasts of sport in the UK. I suppose, Charlie, a sign of the increased commercialisation of sport. Obviously, Sky Sports itself has a lot to do with that in this country as well, but a sign that things are becoming perhaps more towards the American model of how viewers will watch sport.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember sort of, one of probably 25 years ago with us sort of watching football on TV in Italy. And I couldn't believe it when, there was a very quick ad break ahead of a corner. And it seems strange, and I'm not sure we're quite there yet. But yeah, the rugby, that's really interesting. And then that sort of takes us into the World Cup, doesn't it? Later this year, and the water breaks, and whether we're going to be maybe having adverts, in the middle of of each half, because of course those water breaks will take some time. I think water breaks are the right decision for the games, obviously being played outside, because it's going to be absolutely baking. But yeah, I think that's the way TV's moving.
OK, we're almost coming to time, Charlie, but we have to mark the sad passing of a snooker legend in John Virgo, which has made the front page of the Daily Mirror, and people beginning to pay tribute, of course.
Yeah, obviously huge loss for many people. The World Championship won't be the same now. Brilliant commentator, brilliant character. Obviously emerged as a tennis player when I remember snooker becoming showbiz with Terry Griffiths, but particularly Alex Higgins and Steve Davis and Ray Reardon. Virgo wasn't quite as successful as those, but of course everyone remembers him on Big Break. And brilliant sense of humour, and as I said, a terrific commentator. A huge loss.
Yeah, it really is. And he brought a new audience to the sport, didn't he, Charlie?
He did, and I say it was the sense of humour, and even with his commentaries, he wasn't big into stats. It was just his view of the game, and hugely respected. And then even going back into sort of the mid 80s, he was one of the very few players that sort of befriended Alex Higgins, who was obviously a huge character, and they were quite close. This year the World Championships, as I said, won't be the same.
Yeah. It really won't. In the front page of the Mirror, there's quotes from John Virgo's widow, who's paid tribute to her husband after he died suddenly, aged 79. Rosie Rees says, "We were days shy of our 16-year wedding anniversary. I can't imagine life without John." Our hearts go out to him and his family. Thank you very much to Charlie Wyatt and Sam Dean for joining us on Back Pages tonight. As always, if you've missed any of the show, there's another chance to see it. It's available as a podcast. Just download Back Pages on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.